document that, if everybody wants to pull it up. So we, over the weekend, had conversations. When I say we, I'll say I had conversations over the weekend with a number of people about getting an amendment that could be offered by anybody who's interested to the to H-126. We'll take it as individuals to that committee tomorrow morning and offer it. And this is in response to the conversations that we've been having over the past couple of weeks. So just to revisit all of that, we had when Ed Larson was in, he and Sam Lincoln had some conversations, presented a document with some suggested language. I asked whether the Housing Conservation Board could take a look at it and offer some language in response. Conversations back and forth. I know that Trey Martin from the Housing Conservation Board was in touch with Sam Lincoln, and essentially what we've come up with is what you've got in front of you if you pulled it up. So
is that one of these? The one in the middle?
The one in the middle, yeah.
Ellen.
Yeah, it has Ellen's name on it.
Oh, I see.
It's draft 1.1. And the changes are highlighted in yellow. And this is an 11-page bill, and there are essentially 3 changes that have been made, and they're all additional language. So there isn't any language that's been deleted. There's some renumbering. So Ellen's not here, so I'll just quickly go through this. On page 2, subsection 5 has been added. In 2022 acts and resolves, Department of Forest, Parks and Recreation was tasked with developing a Vermont Forest Future Strategic Roadmap to strengthen, modernize, promote, and protect the forest product sector, the greater forest economy, and promote the importance of healthy, resilient, and sustainably managed working forests that provide a diverse array of high-quality products now and in the future. That's new language. The next sections are renumbered, and those are all findings. So it's a new finding. Then, if you continue scrolling down, when you get to page 7, this is under the section 2803, so the conserved land inventory. A couple of changes here. You can see the word or complement has been inserted after maintain. And then at the end of that subsection 1, complete the conserved land inventory and inform the comprehensive strategy in the conservation plan. Then going ahead, page 9, this is in 2804, which is the conservation plan. Language has been added. A comprehensive strategy for achieving the goals of this title while continuing to conserve and protect Vermont's agricultural land, working forests, historic properties, recreational lands, and surface waters. And then down a new section, subsection 4, recommendations to implement the vision and goals of this chapter while also enhancing the state of Vermont's current investments and commitments to working land enterprises, rural landowners, the broad conservation mission implemented by the Secretary and VHCB, including conservation of agricultural land, working forests, historic properties, recreational lands, and surface waters. And I think that completes the changes that were made there. So just again, procedurally, this won't be a committee amendment because it's not a bill that we have. It will be an amendment that anybody in the committee is welcome to sign on to. And we'll want to do that later today, I think. So let me see if anybody has questions.
What is historic property? I can imagine, but if anybody has a definition of that, it'd be helpful.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It may be there because it's already listed in, they're already included in a similar list somewhere else, but I'm not sure.
Very good.
John.
And same with some of the other things, like, is there a definition in statute of working forest as opposed to non-working forest? I mean, you know, even an old forest sort of has a management plan to get there in some ways. And then what makes something a recreational land? Is it, you know, state parks could be both working forest and recreational land.
Yep.
And surface waters, does anybody know, is that just like, you look, you know, further down, you'd see lakes and ponds, or is it?
Yeah, again, I think that this is part of an existing list of what
It sounds like
its conservation mission covers. Representative Cole.
What was the intent on page 7 for adding the complement piece, the maintain or complement?
So back to page 7, the concern that was being addressed there, let me see if I can pick it up, was the fact that the bill as it was originally drafted did not have 2 sections. So there was not a plan, an inventory and then a plan. There was one section. And so that was changed during the course of its time in the other committee. And in the process of being changed, the possibility for making changes to those categories was left in the inventory stage and not the planning stage. So this part of the amendment was intended to address the concerns that were raised about still being able to basically have a conversation about what those categories would end up looking like in the planning phase of the bill, of the process. Representative Lipsky.
Thank you, Chairman Durfee. First of all, there were 4 very specific areas of concern that I know some witnesses testified on and submitted to you, and you then forwarded to the House Environment and Energy Committee. And I feel strongly that before I would endorse these modest adjustments, that I would like the time, I'd like this committee to have the time to reach out to folks like Sam Lincoln, Alan Thompson, and others to get their consideration as to these modest amendments or changes that have been made by the sponsoring committee. And again, given that this committee is the only room in the building with forestry on the door, there are many other stakeholders who I would like the time, a certain amount of time, to reach out to before giving a nod one way or the other. I think without having, 24 hours or 36 hours or 72 hours of time to bring some more clarity and analysis to these changes, I think it would would not represent our committee well, or frankly, the goals of 126.
Yeah, so let me clarify, and I'm sorry, I might not have been very clear about it, but the four suggestions that were made by Sam Lincoln did not go to the other committee. I presented those to Vermont Housing and Conservation Board and asked that organization, working with the other organizations that are involved with advocacy about our state's forests, would take a look at that and see whether they could come up with how they felt about what was there and whether they could come up with suggestions that would incorporate the concerns, that would address the concerns that were raised in those four items. And they did that. And then they did go back to Sam Lincoln. And I talked to Sam yesterday about it and asked him before, and I wanted to be sure that he had seen it and hear what his reaction was. And he said more or less what I thought he would say, but yeah, this is making some progress. It's not everything that we were hoping to see. So, and clearly it's not everything that they were hoping to see if you go back and look at those four. But it does represent a finding of some common ground. And I want to really give both Sam and Ed, who worked on that, and the Housing and Conservation Board and the Natural Resource Council credit for working extremely hard on trying to come up with some language that would be satisfactory to both of their sides of this issue. Only after getting something that was would the other committee be involved. So this was not something that we took to them and said, workshop this. It was, will this work or not? So that's basically the story there. And again, this is not going to be our committee. Anybody in the committee is welcome to sign on to it if they would like to. And I would ask and encourage anybody who feels like we like something to show for the time that we've had working on this bill. Here's an opportunity to do that.
Okay, so as a follow-up, is that the only opportunity we're afforded?
That's the only opportunity that I'm affording anybody. Yes, yeah.
Yeah, well, I clearly can't support that.
Certainly nobody is required to support it. And we're not asking anybody who isn't comfortable with it to sign on to it. So I'm happy to, and I don't want to take too much committee time on it. It's going to be there as an amendment that, as I say, I'll try and get taken care of later this afternoon. But if there aren't any other questions that you think you want to put in front of the committee, we can move on. Representative Lipsky.
Just as a final comment on process, I did reach out to Sam 2 times today, not receiving an answer. I'm not comfortable specifically having a secondhand, without having an in-depth conversation with him who's being represented as supporting this sort of, I don't think that's really proper.
Again, nobody is going to be, if we were taking a vote, you could vote no. There's no.
But there is no vote anyway.
There's no.
Well, your vote's on the House floor.
Yeah.
Pardon me?
It's gonna come on the floor, you can vote there.
When the bill comes up on the floor.
Yeah. It's not, yeah.
Good.
Thank you, Representative.
Okay. So why don't we see if we can get David Hall back in, and while we're tracking him down, Representative Levitt, you're going to try and raise your hand?
No, I'm gonna suggest, no, I don't want to put you wrong. What I want to do is I want to talk to you privately to find out more about what your reservations are.
All right, we'll reserve a week in a conference room.
A week in a conference, okay. Thanks for the heads up, Jed. Okay.
So while we're waiting for David to come back in, I'll direct your attention to the next document, And that is also on our committee page today.
The Jonathan Gibson item.
The David Hall.
Very good.
The new draft.
Will David Hall come back in, you reckon?
Yes, I think as soon as we find him, he will. So I'll just say, and maybe ask David Templeman if he wants to say anything about what this is. So Friday, we didn't do any markup work on the bill, I don't think, on Friday. And when we last had David Hall in, it was Thursday afternoon, and we got to a certain point in the bill and had to end for the day. It was a bit of a slog, you will recall. And at the end of the week, I spoke to a couple of people, including David, who had expressed an interest in looking at the language and trying to make some progress over the weekend. So David Hall then, I think, met with you, David, and
Primarily Catherine Sims, but Monique Presley and myself were present as well.
okay. So that's what we're going to look at. I looked it over yesterday, and my sense is that what's happened is the language has been cleaned up. So some of the clunky, a little bit messy in places, language has been tightened up. And then the draft that we've got here also highlights areas where we have talked about maybe having some policy concerns or want to maybe have some choices to make policy-wise. Is that right, David?
Yeah, I would say, just to reiterate David Hall's concerns, he's concerned about the constitutionality of the bill in general. But with that said, we looked through it together and identified some of the more obvious things that are inconsistencies or subjective language points that we've all identified in committee. And these aren't final edits, they're suggestions for our committee. So this work has been done, but not despite the committee, but with the idea of moving us a little closer to the committee making a decision on these changes. So this was kind of just like doing a little bit of work in advance of this meeting with David Hall coming up. However, I think that he still feels in general that this is problematic, but was willing to go step by step through the document painstakingly and come up with these suggestions. It was about 2.5 hours of yesterday, so.
We'll appreciate putting in that work. Well, I'll just mention that we do have the AG's office coming in tomorrow to talk to us about the whatever legal issues may come up. And, I think we understand now that David Hall has some concerns, and that's been made clear. And now we're going to move on. Representative O'Brien.
I just, in your words, as you understand it from maybe David, what are the big constitutional issues here?
Well, I think, and rightly so, this does strike to the issue of interstate commerce. So, for example, a lot of these things that are being put forward affect customers who are dealing with dealers out of state. So, the effect of this is limited. And then as far as how it strikes on interstate commerce more specifically, I think basically this is because there would be certain things available to Vermonters that aren't available to people outside of the state. Then how does the entity, how does the business adjust to that? Do they make everything available to everyone or, so, yeah. And maybe he can speak more to your question than I can.
I'm actually hoping that he won't. He did spend a good bit of time walking through and listed 4 things the first day he was here. I don't know if you were here, John, but you can go back and check that. And then before we have the AG's office in, I think, we'll review what those are, but yeah. Rodney.
I just wanted to add to the list that these manufacturers are not in the state of Vermont
Yes,
or even in the United States.
in many cases.
So we're trying to force out of state and out of country manufacturers to try to require them to comply with this. I think you're gonna find a big issue there.
Okay, well, yeah.
It'd be interesting that something like California, we always hear about as far as like automobile emissions or, certain products have carcinogens. So somehow California seems to get around a lot of this because they always have a much higher bar than the rest of the country.
Well, I asked about that specifically because that came straight to mind. And what the answer was that California was mandated by the EPA to curtail emissions. So that gave them the authority to work independently from the rest of the market. So that's the exception there. Yeah, but normally you're absolutely hitting the nail on the head. This would be problematic if it were just California on its own.
So maybe we can, any sense of, David, okay, well, why don't we stand down for a minute? Mike.
I just would like to remind everybody around the table again that we have a couple of very detailed witness and public comment submissions that sort of get at a lot of maybe the other side of the argument to what David has presented us step by step. So I would really recommend taking a look at those if you haven't yet. And you still have questions about the constitutional, please.